initially they were saying that FEMA was going to pay for this. They still haven't hashed out those details. I mean, it's FEMA, so they'll do whatever Trump tells them to do. But at least for the foreseeable future, this money has been transferred out of state of Florida funds.
It's Jordan with Status Coup.
This is Ashley with Status Coup.
On the ground.
In Philadelphia.
Flint, Michigan. East Palestine, Ohio. Please support the leading independent news outlet on the ground.
Covering what the corporate media covers up.
It sure seems to me Florida taxpayers are going to be on the hook for this, even though the governor has said it's coming magically from FEMA, which the president says he wants to dismantle. But I'll play this clip. This is from our interview. Our reporter Ashley interviewed State Senator Chev Jones. He was one of several Democratic politicians who were blocked, denied entry from entering. He points out that by Florida law, it seems like they're not going to be reimbursed by FEMA.
We're not even in hurricane season yet, and funds are being pulled from FEMA to do this. So already that whole condition is happening. And I believe that the excuse that was given for you and other representatives being denied entry to the facility to take a tour was that it was not safe for you guys to enter.
Yeah, they may mention that it was unsafe, but I also want to make it clear that the state of Florida, although have a 287G agreement with the federal government and the partnership of our local law enforcement and state law enforcement with the federal government, the one thing I want to make it clear that $450 million that has been spoken of will be covered by taxpayers. FEMA, if we look at the court filings, the Department of Homeland Security made it clear that with the 287G agreement that the state of Florida has with the federal government, that while, yes, they have that in flow, the detaining of detainees is at the behest of the state of Florida. That the federal government, they're not asking the state of Florida to detain anybody. The state of Florida has done this on their own will. And the governor has moved this $450 million on the basis of emergency powers. Florida is not under an immigration emergency. Let's make sure we put that on the table. But I also think it's important for us to point out that FEMA has also made it clear that the grant that that state of Florida saw would be able to pay for this. They make it clear that no, it doesn't qualify for this. So therefore, $450 million, $500 million, is stuck on the back of the taxpayers. And I want to make sure people understand that we just left out of a 60-day plus 45-day legislative session where this, if so right, should have gone through the appropriations process.
So I think that's important. I mean, you've worked in government bureaucracy, but beyond the health, humanity ramifications, there's an affordable housing crisis in Florida. Property tax insurance is too high. There's a lot of issues, and somebody's going to pay the bill for this.
Yes. And so initially they were saying that FEMA was going to pay for this, that they were going to get Homeland to pay for this. And then I noticed a few days later, they started walking back by saying FEMA's going to pay for some of this. They still haven't hashed out those details. I mean, it's FEMA, so they'll do whatever Trump tells them to do. It's really up to him. And yeah, you could sue to try to stop it, but it's going to be in the courts for however many months or years. And we've already seen how the Supreme Court doesn't care about the rule of law or what the law says at all. So he could end up getting his way. But at least for the foreseeable future, this money has been transferred out of state of Florida funds. But I also want to be clear that even if it was federal money, that's still taxpayer dollars. That's still something that we're all paying for. You know, it would be just beyond the state of Florida. But yes, certainly that's not something that giving their second lowest in teacher pay in the country, maybe even the worst now, I'm not sure. And their education system is crumbling and their colleges are buckling and, there's a housing crisis. They're pretty much every crisis that a state can have, Florida has. And instead they decided to invent a whole new one to spend $500 million on.
And as of 6 days ago, I don't believe it's changed. Despite promises of FEMA funds, Florida has so far received no federal money from Alligator Alcatraz. New court filing, Department of Homeland Security says Florida hasn't even applied for federal funds. And then there's I don't know if Trump is this vindictive, but it's not a secret. He's not a big fan of Governor DeSantis down there. So
yeah, DeSantis has kind of pinned him into a hard place with that, though, because if he doesn't provide the money, then he looks like he's not fully intent on this whole ethnic cleansing of Hispanic and Latino people, which he absolutely is. So he's probably going to throw them some money. I think that's going to be what at the end of the day, they're going to cover some of the expenses, but the bulk share of that's going to be Florida taxpayers.
I mean, I can't verify it, but from what I've heard, there's belief there might be some U.S. citizens that were temporarily there.
People were yelling, "Help me, help me." I heard in the back someone say, "I'm a U.S. citizen."
So based on what we've seen around the country with them snagging up U.S. citizens accidentally or intentionally, there might be U.S. citizens at some point there too in the bullseye. Not that it really matters. We've already had
that happen, in other places, and then they've been deported to other countries. And the reports of like people being shipped to like South Sudan, people who've never been to Africa, have really kind of, and the Supreme Court okayed that, of course, been somewhat stunning. And there is this mandate now that Stephen Miller wants of, arresting what I think he said 5,000 a day or something like that. You cannot meet that quota without arresting people whose status here is legal, whether they're U.S. citizens or their temporary authorization or they're work permitted. You cannot meet that quota without catching innocent people. I mean, it's like the example just from Florida where one of the construction workers or a couple of construction workers were next to a beach where a kid was attacked by a shark. The three guys, without any hesitation, jump in, save the little girl. And then the guy is pulled over like 2 days later and shows them his work permit. He had it and everything. And ICE still came and took him. And so, it's like even the good guys, the guys that we would want to be here, who have legal work authorization to be here, are getting picked up days after they're just on the news for being for saving this adorable little girl and from a shark. I mean, do you know how brave you have to be to jump into an ocean while a shark attack is happening to save a stranger's child? And without any hesitation. And the news did a thing and the mom was terrified and it was horrific. It was these are the people we want to be American citizens. And you contrast that to that story from France from a few years ago where an African migrant literally scaled a building with his bare hands to save a child who was falling off the balcony. And they gave him citizenship. He was pending, but he met with Macron and they gave him citizenship for his bravery and selflessness. I was like, why can't we be like that? If anybody deserves it, it's the guy who jumped in to save a little girl from a shark. As a construction worker legally here, and they're brown, so nobody cares. And eventually it's not going to just be brown people. And I think that is the conversation that a lot of this country is not ready for.
I want to ask you also, seems to me, and I've covered Flint for almost a decade. Obviously, we know there's a water crisis in America, but millions of people, about 8 million people get their water from the Everglades. I'll just show you this clip from my reporters on the ground reporting about concerns about basically shit being dumped in the Everglades.
We have such this low amount of regulation around our environmental issues already. I'm not surprised that their plan is just to dump a bunch of shit in the Everglades. Where's their poop gonna go? I hate to ask the obvious question, but there's no septic system here. It's, not only just the weather itself, they want to torture people with that, but just the sewage situation that multiple people have already brought up. You can't put septic tanks in the middle of the Everglades. People come here, they go on airboat rides, they go see the alligators, they kayak, they stand up paddleboard, they go to the beach. And you think about how delicate it is in terms of being a system. We got 1,000 people. You're going to drive how many miles? 70, 100 miles? The logistics of this are stupid. What happens when you put people in an environment? There is poop, there is pee, there is lots of other kinds of waste. Where are we going to go? So how many more trucks are going to be driving down this road, right? Or are we just going to dump it in the Everglades? I don't know. There's not been a plan. This has been put forth as political theater.
The creeks and the water that flows through Big Cypress down to Everglades National Park into the Biscayne Aquifer, that's our drinking water.
Your thoughts on, I doesn't seem like they have a full, septic or plumbing system there.
Yeah, Dr. Banya is right. All apparent reporting has not shown either through site plans or through tours that there's any structural sewage whatsoever, which, of course leads to the question of, okay, where's it going? There's no large tanks for sewage runoff even. It looks like they have a series of porta potties out there and then a shared communal toilet space in the chain link area. But sewage has to go somewhere. It doesn't just, unless it's not flushing, as you said earlier, then it's possible it is just sitting there, which creates all kinds of other health hazards, but it has to go somewhere. And if there's no tanks or any kind of system in place, and it's just going into the Everglades, which is one of the most sensitive and important environments that we have in this country.
I want to ask you, because you're a climatologist, you've worked on hurricanes, you had a top position in Louisiana on hurricanes. It seems to me, you need all hands on deck for the rapid record hurricanes hitting South Florida anyway. So if they end up giving FEMA funds for this to pay for this hastily built, Gestapo prison, isn't that taking away from actual hurricane relief elsewhere?
So not quite, because major disaster declarations usually come with some kind of legislative funding bill. Like there was a huge fight over Hurricane Sandy way back in 2012 or 13. I can't remember which year it was, because they wanted $81 billion, to cover the repairs and the costs of recovery. And Congress had to vote on it. We've had multiple instances in which Congress has denied spending bills for natural disasters. But FEMA itself is being basically broken down and sold off for parts. And so FEMA itself's budget can come a lot of that ad hoc kind of stuff, but they'll end up paying for that too. And so it's, it's really just an unbridled attempt at shuffling money to contractors and to campaign donors and, to grease the wheels of everybody who feels like they're owed something. Whoever they bought the trailers from that they don't want the public to know, whoever they bought the tents from, whoever they are paying for the contracts for security, whoever they're hiring for health, these are all kickbacks. And it's going to end up, if there is a major hurricane landfall in the next few months, costing a lot more than $500 million. Right.
And also separate from the money, it kind of diverts manpower away from other areas that need rapid response.
Yeah, there's been a claim that they're going to reassign National Guardsmen to be prison guards, which is not what they're supposed to do. But National Guard people are among the first that are activated in a disaster situation to assist with evacuation and recovery, search and rescue, all that stuff. So, yeah, it's going to be taking staff away as well.
And my last question, you don't have to share any private conversations, but you mentioned the head of the Florida emergency management, that you were surprised that he was kind of towing the line. Based on your experience working in Florida government on climate, scientific issues, COVID, would you suspect most experts working in the bureaucracy are kind of alarmed by how this was built, are afraid of what we're talking about, that there could be a massive hurricane disaster, or they're kind of just cashing their checks and going home?
My understanding of Kevin this was years ago too. I stopped working with the state 5 years ago. People change in that time a lot. But he is probably on his knees praying every night that a hurricane doesn't hit that area.
It's a good place to end. Thank you so much, Rebecca Jones. We should talk another time about your ordeal dealing with the DeSantis, I would say, Gestapo. They targeted you for blowing the whistle that he manipulated COVID data. He has spun that Florida did, the best of most states in terms of COVID deaths. That is not true. And you thankfully blew the whistle that they were manipulating data. Actually, I will ask you one thing on that. Is there other things you've learned since your ordeal, because you were basically had to, for you and your family's safety, leave Florida, other threats the Florida public should know in terms of public health? Because obviously his Surgeon General, his top health officials have basically made COVID like they might as well be COVID truthers. They have cut other funding for vaccinations and other things. What else should people know?
Well, they also decided to stop putting fluoride in water because of conspiracy theories about mind control, which, I mean, a lot of these, and, you know, are really kind of rooted in this crazy idea of government mind control. So the whole chemtrails conspiracy theory is also rooted in mind control conspiracies. And it's been around since like the 70s, but they're bringing that one back by DeSantis passed this bill that is now going to Congress, apparently banning any kind of atmospheric dispersants that could alter or change the weather or climate, which unironically would be greenhouse gases, but I'm sure that there would be an exemption in there for them. There are so many things, and I've tried to keep up with them over the years that they've done, especially within the Department of Health, that are frightening and threatening to the general public. I mean, you know, there was the instances with measles where they were basically telling people that they didn't need to isolate if they'd been exposed to the measles in their school, which was insane. The lowering of standards for school vaccines is incredibly dangerous. The permitting of additional, you know, philosophical exemptions. Mississippi has the strictest vaccine school requirements in the country. They only allow for medical exemption, period. Doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what your philosophy is. If you don't have a medical reason, you are not exempt. And they have among the lowest cases of childhood diseases from those things that we have that can be prevented by vaccines. Florida is going in the complete opposite direction. There was a bout of leprosy that they had for a while. They're obviously struggling with things like dengue fever, West Nile virus, Zika. It is a petri dish, and there is no one in charge of public health there who is actually concerned about public health. And that's incredibly dangerous. And I write about this all the time for Mesoscale. So if anybody wants to see my 5 years of tracking all of this, they can go check that out.
I'll put it in the description. Thank you so much for taking the time. We'll keep in touch. I hope I don't have to talk to you again, because I hope there's not a disaster and mass death, but I fear there will be. So thank you, Rebecca Jones.
Thank you.